Have you ever felt untouchable? Like no matter how much you suffered, no one wanted to come near you. Like your pain made you too broken, too dirty, too much for anyone to bear. There was a woman in the Bible who bled for 12 years. 12 years of doctors, 12 years of spending everything she had, 12 years of being told to stay away from everyone she loved. And then, in one desperate moment, she did something that could have gotten her stoned to death. She reached out and touched Jesus. Her name is not even recorded in Scripture. She is known only by her suffering, the bleeding woman. But what happened next would prove that when you are desperate enough to reach for Jesus, no amount of blood, no amount of shame, no amount of years can keep him from reaching back. And there is something I will reveal at the end of this video. Something about the one word Jesus said to her that changes everything about how you see your own desperation. So stay with me, because the story of the woman everyone avoided but Jesus called daughter begins now. To understand this woman, we need to go back to the streets of ancient Israel, back to a time when one drop of blood could end your life as you knew it. Imagine the scene, the marketplace in full swing. Merchants calling out their wares, their voices competing for attention. The smell of fresh bread mixing with cinnamon and spices, livestock bleating in their pens, women gathering at the well, laughing together, sharing the day's news, their children running between market stalls, playing, carefree, and somewhere on the edge of it all, hidden in the shadows, watching from a distance, was a woman who could not join them. She had not touched another human being in 12 years, not once. She had not embraced her children. She had not held her husband. She had not sat with friends over a meal. She had not entered the temple to worship. She had not felt the warmth of human contact, because the law of Moses was clear. Anyone bleeding was unclean, untouchable, and not just unclean herself. Everything she touched became unclean. Everyone she touched became unclean. If she sat on a chair, that chair was defiled. If she lay on a bed, that bed was contaminated. And anyone who touched that chair or that bed became unclean themselves. They would have to wash their clothes, bathe with water, and remain isolated until evening. Can you imagine living like that? Not for a week, not for a month, for 12 years, 4,380 days of being untouchable. The Bible records her story in 3 Gospels. Mark, Matthew, and Luke all thought it was important enough to write down. And Mark chapter 5 gives us the devastating details. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. 12 years of hope turning into disappointment. 12 years of paying doctors who promised cures that never came. 12 years of watching her life savings disappear. 12 years of her body betraying her over and over again. And now she had nothing left. No money, no hope, no options, no one left to turn to. But here is what the religious leaders never told her. Here is what the law never mentioned. Desperation can look a lot like faith. And sometimes the most radical act of worship is reaching for Jesus when everyone else has told you to stay away. She heard the crowd before she saw it. The sound of hundreds of feet shuffling through the narrow streets. Voices raised in excitement. Someone important was passing through. And then she heard the name. Jesus. The healer from Nazareth, the one who touched lepers and they were cleansed, the one who spoke to Samaritan women at wells in broad daylight, the one who let children climb on his lap, the one who broke every religious rule to reach the broken. And something stirred inside her, a voice she had not heard in 12 years, a whisper of possibility. What if? What if she could just get close enough? What if she could just touch the edge of his cloak? What if after 12 years of bleeding, 12 years of shame, 12 years of isolation, this could be the day everything changed? But there was a problem. Several problems, actually. First, she was unclean. If she entered that crowd, if she brushed against people, she would be making all of them unclean. It was not just socially unacceptable, it was a violation of the law. Second, if anyone recognized her, if anyone realized who she was and what she was doing, they could stone her. The punishment for deliberately defiling others was severe. Third, the crowd was massive. Jesus was surrounded by hundreds of people, all pressing in, all trying to get closer. How could she possibly reach him? Have you ever been in a situation where doing the right thing felt impossible? Where every logical reason told you to stay where you were? Where everyone said you should accept your circumstances and stop hoping for something different? The woman stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest, her hands trembling, her breath coming in short gasps. She could turn around, she could go back to her house. She could accept that this was just who she was now, the bleeding woman, the untouchable, the forgotten. Or she could take one step forward. She pulled her cloak tighter around her face, covering as much as possible. And she stepped into the crowd. The press of bodies was immediate and overwhelming, shoulders bumping against hers, elbows jabbing into her sides, feet stepping on feet. The smell of sweat and dust thick in the air, the heat of hundreds of people packed together. She kept her head down. She whispered silent apologies with every person she touched. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I am making you unclean." But she did not stop. She pushed forward, inch by inch, step by step. And then she saw him, Jesus, walking through the center of the crowd, his back to her, his cloak, his tallit, dragging slightly on the ground behind him. The hem with its blue tassels, the tzitzit, the reminder of God's commandments. And she thought, if I can just touch that, just the edge, just the fringe, maybe I do not have to interrupt him. Maybe I do not have to announce myself. Maybe I can just reach out in secret and he will never even know. So she stretched out her hand, her fingers trembling, her whole body shaking with equal parts fear and faith. And in one desperate lunge forward, she touched the hem of his garment. And immediately she felt it. The bleeding stopped, just like that. 12 years of constant flow, 12 years of her body failing her. And in an instant, in the space of a single heartbeat, it was gone. She felt it in her body, the healing spreading through her like warm water, washing away 12 years of pain. Her legs almost gave out beneath her. She gasped. Tears flooded her eyes. She wanted to collapse right there in the middle of the crowd, but she had to get away. She had to disappear before anyone noticed. She had done it. She had touched him, and she was healed, and he did not even know. She could slip away now. She could go home. She could start her life over. No one had to know. But then Jesus stopped walking. The entire crowd stumbled to a halt around him, and he turned. And he said something that made her blood run cold. "Who touched me?" The question hung in the air. The crowd fell silent, and the woman felt every eye searching for the answer. Before we continue, if this story is stirring something inside you, if you are beginning to see that your desperation is not a disqualification but an invitation, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because what happens next will reveal the most beautiful picture of how Jesus responds when you reach for him in faith. And you will want more stories like this. Stories of forgotten biblical characters with life-changing lessons. Real stories of shame turned to honor. Messages that prove Jesus does not wait for you to clean up before he calls you his own. Peter, always the first to speak, said something that sounds almost comical if you do not understand the weight of the moment. Luke chapter 8 records it. "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." In other words, everyone is touching you. Hundreds of people. Of course, someone touched you. What kind of question is that? But Jesus knew. He said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." This was not an accidental brush of fabric. This was not the ordinary press of a crowd. This was something different. Someone had touched him with faith. Someone had reached for him with desperation. Someone had drawn healing from him through belief, and he wanted to know who. The woman realized in that terrible, beautiful moment that her secret was about to be exposed. She could stay hidden. She could let the moment pass. But something inside her, maybe the same desperation that had pushed her through the crowd in the first place, made her step forward. Mark chapter 5 says she came trembling with fear. She fell at his feet, and in front of the entire crowd, she told him the whole truth. Picture that moment in vivid cinematic detail. The sun beating down on the dusty street, turning the air white with heat. Hundreds of people packed together, shoulder to shoulder, their faces glistening with sweat. All eyes fixed on one woman kneeling at the feet of Jesus. Her voice shaking as she spoke, barely above a whisper at first, tears streaming down her face, leaving tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Her hands clasped together, trembling. The crowd holding its breath, leaning in to hear. 12 years, 12 years I have bled. 12 years I have spent everything. 12 years I have been alone. And I thought, if I could just touch your cloak. I am sorry. I am so sorry for making you unclean. I am sorry for pushing through the crowd. I am sorry for defiling everyone I touched. But I was desperate, and I believed. And the moment I touched you, I was healed. The crowd must have gasped, some in horror. The bleeding woman had been walking among them, touching them, making them all unclean. Some in pity. 12 years of suffering. How could anyone endure that? Some in wonder. She was healed just by touching his clothes. But Jesus did not react the way anyone expected. He did not rebuke her for breaking the law. He did not scold her for making others unclean. He did not shame her for reaching out in secret. Instead, he spoke one word that changed everything: daughter. Luke chapter 8 records his exact words: "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Daughter. Do you understand the weight of that word? For 12 years, she had been the bleeding woman, the unclean, the untouchable, the one everyone avoided. She had no identity apart from her suffering. She was defined entirely by what was wrong with her. And Jesus looked at her and gave her a new name, not patient, not healed woman, not former sufferer, daughter. He claimed her as his own. He gave her an identity rooted not in her past, but in her relationship with him. He restored not just her body, but her place in the community, her dignity, her worth. And he did it publicly, in front of everyone who had avoided her, in front of everyone who had whispered about her, in front of everyone who had made her feel less than human. He called her daughter. But there is more. Jesus said, "Your faith has healed you." Not my power, not my divinity, not my decision, your faith. He gave her credit. He honored her desperation. He celebrated the very thing she thought she needed to hide. Her secret touch was not a violation. It was an act of worship. Her desperation was not a weakness. It was faith in its rawest form. And Jesus wanted everyone to know that this woman, this bleeding, broken, bankrupt, desperate woman, had demonstrated the kind of faith that moves heaven. What would have happened if she had stayed hidden? What if she had slipped away after being healed without revealing herself? She would have had the healing, but she would not have had the word. She would have had the miracle, but she would not have had the identity. She would have been cured, but she would not have been called daughter. Sometimes Jesus waits for us to come out of hiding, not because he does not know where we are, but because we need to hear him speak our new name out loud. Go in peace, Jesus said. The Greek word is porou es erenen, not just go, but walk into peace, step into shalom, enter into wholeness. For 12 years she had lived in pieces, her body broken, her finances destroyed, her relationships severed, her community lost, her identity fractured. And Jesus, with one word, one touch, one moment of recognition, made her whole again. Not just physically, entirely. Body, soul, community, identity, purpose, whole. The woman stood up, no longer trembling, no longer ashamed, no longer hiding. She stood in front of the crowd as a daughter of the king, and she walked away in peace. But her story does not end there, because what Jesus did for her that day was not just about her. It was about every person who has ever felt too broken, too dirty, too desperate to approach God. It was about you, right now, in whatever crowd you are hiding in, with whatever bleeding you have been living with for however many years. Jesus is stopping. He is turning around. He is asking, "Who touched me?" Not because he does not know, but because he wants to call you out of hiding so he can call you by your new name. The bleeding woman was not just a desperate individual in an ancient crowd. She was a living picture of something far greater, a picture of what God has been doing since the Garden of Eden. She represents every single one of us, bleeding, broken, spending everything we have trying to fix ourselves, growing worse instead of better, isolated by shame, unclean by our own sin. And Jesus represents exactly what his name means, God with us, Emmanuel, the one who does not stay distant from our uncleanness but walks right into the middle of our mess. The Old Testament law said that when a clean person touches something unclean, the clean becomes unclean. But Jesus reversed it. When Jesus touches the unclean becomes clean. The leper touches him and is cleansed. The dead girl is raised to life. The woman bleeding for 12 years reaches for him and is healed. This is the gospel. Not that we clean ourselves up first and then approach God, but that we come to him in our brokenness, in our desperation, in our uncleanness, and his touch transforms us completely. The Apostle Paul understood this. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, he wrote, "God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God." Jesus took our uncleanness upon himself so that we could be made clean. He was treated as untouchable on the cross so that we could be called daughters and sons. And just as the bleeding woman spent everything she had trying to fix herself before she finally reached for Jesus, we spend our lives trying every solution except the one that actually works. We try to be good enough. We try to earn our healing. We try to hide our bleeding. We try to manage our shame in secret. But it is only when we reach the end of ourselves, when we have nothing left, when we are desperate enough to push through the crowd and touch Jesus, that we discover what he has been offering all along: healing, identity, peace, wholeness. So what do we learn from the bleeding woman? First, your desperation is not a disqualification. It is an invitation. The bleeding woman thought she had to hide her desperation. She thought her need made her unworthy. She thought she had to touch Jesus in secret and slip away before anyone noticed. But Jesus stopped. He called her out. He honored her faith. He celebrated her desperation. If you are desperate today, if you have spent everything trying to fix yourself, if you have bled for years with no relief, do not hide it. Bring it to Jesus. Your desperation is not a sign of weak faith. It is often the very thing that pushes you to reach for him when nothing else will. Second, Jesus wants more than your healing. He wants your whole story. The woman could have stayed hidden after being healed. She could have kept her miracle secret, but Jesus wanted her to tell the whole truth in front of everyone. Why? Because healing in secret leaves you with the miracle, but without the identity. Jesus did not just want to cure her disease. He wanted to restore her dignity. He wanted to give her a name. He wanted to bring her back into community. When you experience God's grace, do not hide it. Tell your story, not to boast in yourself, but to boast in him. Because when you share how Jesus met you in your desperation, you give hope to every other desperate person listening. Finally, one word from Jesus changes everything. Daughter. That was the word that transformed the bleeding woman's entire identity. Not healed woman, not former sufferer. Daughter. You are not defined by what you have been through. You are not defined by how long you have bled. You are not defined by how much you have spent. You are not defined by your shame. When Jesus speaks your new name, everything changes. You are His, you are chosen, you are loved, you are whole. So the question is not, do I have enough faith to be healed? The question is, will I reach for Jesus even when I feel unworthy, even when I am afraid, even when everyone says I should stay away? If the bleeding woman's story has touched your heart today, I want you to do 3 things. First, leave a comment below and write, "Jesus calls me daughter." Because maybe today is the day you finally believe that your desperation is not too much for Jesus, that your bleeding does not disqualify you, that one touch of faith can change everything, and that He has a new name for you. Second, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every week, we bring you forgotten biblical characters with life-changing lessons, real stories of people who were broken and made whole. Messages that prove Jesus does not wait for you to clean up before He calls you His own. Stories that do not just inform you but transform how you see your worth in His eyes. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who has been bleeding in secret. Someone who feels untouchable. Someone who needs to know that Jesus is not afraid of their mess, because this is not just an ancient story. This is your story. This is the invitation being offered to you right now. The bleeding woman started as an unnamed, broken, isolated sufferer. She became a daughter, healed and whole, not because she earned it, but because she reached for Jesus in desperate faith. The difference? She stopped hiding and started reaching. Thousands of years have passed since the bleeding woman pushed through that crowd and touched the hem of Jesus' garment. But the message echoes unchanged to reach you today. You are not too broken. You are not too dirty. You are not too desperate. Your bleeding does not disqualify you from His touch. Your shame does not keep Him away. Today, Jesus is walking through your crowd. He is close enough to touch, and He is waiting for you to reach for Him with the same desperate faith that moved heaven 2,000 years ago. Do not wait until you feel worthy. Do not wait until you have it all together. Do not wait until your bleeding stops on its own. Reach for Him now, right now, in your desperation, in your brokenness, in your shame, because when you touch Jesus, He does not pull away. He stops, He turns, He looks at you, and He calls you by your new name, daughter, son, beloved, His. No matter what you have been through, no matter how long you have bled, no matter how much you have spent trying to fix yourself, no matter who has told you to stay away, He is calling you out of hiding. He is giving you a new identity. He is making you whole. May the story of the bleeding woman remind you today that one touch of desperate faith can change everything. That Jesus is not afraid of your mess. That He calls you not by your past, but by your identity in Him. God bless you deeply. Until the next story.